The snow was falling that Christmas Eve in a way I had never seen before. Each flake seemed to drift down with purpose, landing softly on the windowsill of our old farmhouse, melting slowly against the warmth that radiated from inside. I was 8 years old, and the world felt impossibly large and impossibly magical all at once. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled every corner of our home, mixing with the sweet aroma of my mother's sugar cookies baking in the oven. The kitchen was alive with warmth, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel safe, protected from the bitter cold outside. My father had spent the afternoon stringing lights along the porch railing, his breath visible in the frigid air as he worked. I watched him from the window, my small hands pressed against the cold glass, leaving foggy prints that I would trace with my finger. He moved with careful precision, making sure each bulb was perfectly spaced, each wire tucked neatly away. When he finally came inside, stamping the snow from his boots on the worn welcome mat, his cheeks were red from the cold, and his eyes sparkled with something I could not quite name. It was joy, perhaps, or maybe anticipation. He pulled off his thick gloves and rubbed his hands together, the friction creating a soft whisking sound that I can still hear in my memory. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, the fabric faded and soft from years of use. She smiled at my father, and he smiled back, and in that moment, I felt the weight of their love for each other, for me, for my younger sister Emma who was napping upstairs. It was a love that filled the spaces between words, that lived in glances and gentle touches. She handed him a mug of hot cocoa, steam rising from the surface in delicate spirals, and he took it gratefully, wrapping both hands around the ceramic warmth. Emma woke just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple. She came down the stairs slowly, her small feet padding softly on the wooden steps, her favorite blanket trailing behind her like a cape. At 4 years old, she still believed in magic with an intensity that made everything around her seem brighter. Her eyes were wide and blue, reflecting the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree that stood in the corner of our living room. That tree was our pride and joy, a 7-foot-tall Douglas fir that my father and I had cut down ourselves from the tree farm just outside of town. We had spent an entire afternoon searching for the perfect one, walking through rows and rows of evergreens, their needles releasing that sharp, clean scent every time we brushed against them. Decorating the tree had been a family affair. My mother brought out boxes of ornaments from the attic, each one wrapped carefully in tissue paper, each one holding a story. There were glass balls that had belonged to her grandmother, their surfaces painted with delicate winter scenes. There were wooden ornaments that my father had carved when he was young, simple shapes of stars and angels that bore the marks of his inexperienced hands. There were ornaments that Emma and I had made in school, construction paper and glittering glue, precious beyond measure. As we hung each one, my mother would tell us its history, her voice soft and melodic, weaving tales of Christmases past, of relatives we had never met, of traditions that stretched back generations. The evenings settled around us like a comfortable blanket. My father lit a fire in the fireplace, and soon the crackling of burning would join the symphony of sounds that made our home feel alive. The flames danced and flickered, casting moving shadows on the walls, creating shapes that seemed almost alive. Emma sat on the floor near the tree, arranging and rearranging the presents that had appeared beneath its branches over the past few weeks. She would pick up each one, shake it gently near her ear, trying to guess what might be inside. Her face was a picture of concentration, her little brow furrowed, her lips pressed together in thought. My mother called us to dinner just as the church bells in town began to ring, their deep tones carrying across the snowy landscape, announcing the arrival of Christmas Eve. We gathered around the table, the four of us, and held hands as my father said grace. His voice was steady and warm, thanking God for our family, for our health, for the food before us, for the love that bound us together. When he finished, we all said amen, and the word hung in the air for a moment, sacred and sincere. Dinner was a feast. My mother had prepared a roasted chicken, its skin golden and crispy, the meat tender and juicy. There were mashed potatoes, creamy and smooth, with butter melting into little pools on top. There were green beans, cooked with bacon and onions, their flavor rich and savory. There was homemade bread, still warm from the oven, its crust crackling when we tore into it. And there was cranberry sauce, tart and sweet, the perfect complement to everything else. We ate slowly, savoring each bite, talking and laughing, sharing stories from our day, from our week, from our lives. Emma could barely contain her excitement. She kept asking when Santa would come, her voice rising with each question, her small body practically vibrating with anticipation. My mother assured her that Santa would not come until she was fast asleep, that he only visited children who were tucked safely in their beds, dreaming sweet dreams. Emma nodded solemnly, as if this information was both new and vitally important, though we had told her the same thing every Christmas Eve of her short life. After dinner, we moved to the living room for our traditional Christmas Eve activities. My father read from the Bible, the story of the Nativity, his voice taking on a reverent tone as he spoke of Mary and Joseph, of the journey to Bethlehem, of the baby born in a manger. Emma sat in my mother's lap, her eyes growing heavy as she listened, her thumb finding its way to her mouth, a habit she was supposed to be breaking but that my mother allowed on special occasions. I sat on the floor, leaning against my father's legs, feeling the rumble of his voice through his body, letting the familiar words wash over me. When the story was finished, my mother suggested we sing carols. She had a beautiful voice, clear and strong, and she led us through all the classics. Silent Night, O Holy Night, Joy to the World, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. My father's voice was deeper, less polished, but full of warmth and sincerity. I sang along as best I could, my young voice cracking on the high notes, but nobody minded. Emma hummed more than sang, making up words when she did not know the real ones, her creativity boundless and charming. The music filled our home, spilling out through the windows into the cold night air, a gift to anyone who might be passing by. As the evening wore on, my mother announced it was time for Emma and me to get ready for bed. Emma protested, of course, insisting she was not tired, even as her eyes drooped and her yawns grew more frequent. My mother scooped her up, and Emma's protests faded into sleepy murmurs as she rested her head on my mother's shoulder. I followed them upstairs, my own exhaustion beginning to catch up with me, though I fought against it. I wanted to stay awake, to see Santa, to catch a glimpse of the magic that everyone talked about, but that remained frustratingly elusive. My mother helped Emma into her pajamas, soft flannel covered in snowflakes and reindeer. She brushed Emma's hair, long and blonde and tangled from the day's activities, working through the knots with patient gentleness. Emma's room was small but cozy, painted a pale pink that glowed warmly in the light from her bedside lamp. Stuffed animals lined the shelves and covered the bed, an army of soft companions that kept her company through the night. My mother tucked her in, pulling the blankets up to her chin, kissing her forehead, whispering words of love that I could not quite hear but could feel in the air. I changed into my own pajamas in my room across the hall. My room was different from Emma's, painted blue, filled with books and model airplanes and posters of astronauts. I loved space, loved the idea of exploring the unknown, of traveling to distant worlds. My father had promised that one day we would build a telescope together, that we would spend nights looking at the stars, identifying constellations, searching for planets. I could not wait for that day, but tonight, my mind was on more immediate magic. My mother came to tuck me in as well, sitting on the edge of my bed, her weight causing the mattress to dip slightly. She smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, like home, like safety. She asked me if I was excited for Christmas morning, and I nodded, unable to find words big enough to express what I was feeling. She smiled and brushed my hair back from my forehead, her touch cool and soothing. She told me she loved me, that I was her special boy, that she was so proud of the person I was becoming. Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and I felt tears prick at my eyes, though I did not understand why. She turned off my light and left the door open just a crack, the way I liked it, so that a sliver of light from the hallway could keep the darkness at bay. I lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. I could hear my parents moving around downstairs, their voices low and indistinct, punctuated occasionally by soft laughter. I could hear the wind outside, whistling through the bare branches of the oak tree that stood sentinel in our front yard. I could hear the house itself, the creaks and groans of old wood, the hum of the furnace, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I tried to stay awake, I really did. I stared at the ceiling, counting the glow-in-the-dark stars that my father had helped me stick up there, arranged in the patterns of real constellations. I thought about what presents might be waiting for me in the morning. I had asked for a new bicycle, red with white stripes, with a bell that rang clear and loud. I had asked for books, adventure stories about pirates and explorers. I had asked for a model rocket kit, something my father and I could build together. But more than any of those things, I wanted something I could not quite name, something that felt just out of reach. Sleep came for me despite my resistance, pulling me down into dreams that were vivid and strange. I dreamed I was flying over our town, looking down at all the houses decorated with lights, at the snow-covered streets, at the church with its tall steeple. I dreamed I could see into every home, could see families gathered together, could feel their joy and their love radiating up toward me like heat. I dreamed I saw Santa's sleigh in the distance, pulled by reindeer that moved through the sky with impossible grace, their hooves leaving trails of stardust in their wake. I woke suddenly, my heart pounding, though I did not know why. The house was silent, more silent than I had ever heard it. The kind of silence that feels heavy, that presses against your ears, that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat. I lay still for a moment, trying to orient myself, trying to remember where I was and what had woken me. Then I heard it, a sound so soft I almost thought I had imagined it. It was the sound of bells, tiny and distant, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I sat up slowly, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The sliver of light from the hallway was gone. Someone had closed my door completely. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold wooden floor, sending a shiver up my spine. I moved to the door and opened it carefully, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. The hallway was dark, but I could see a faint glow coming from downstairs, a warm, golden light that flickered and danced like firelight. I knew I should go back to bed. I knew that if Santa was downstairs, I was not supposed to see him. But curiosity pulled at me with an irresistible force. I moved to the top of the stairs and looked down. The living room was bathed in that golden glow, and I could see shadows moving, though I could not make out any distinct shapes. I heard the bells again, clearer now, and with them came a sound like laughter, deep and jolly and warm. I took one step down, then another, moving as quietly as I could. The stairs seemed to stretch on forever, each one creaking under my weight no matter how carefully I placed my feet. My heart was racing, my breath coming quick and shallow. I felt like I was doing something forbidden, something dangerous, but I could not stop myself. I reached the bottom of the stairs and peered around the corner into the living room. What I saw took my breath away. The Christmas tree seemed to glow from within, each ornament catching and reflecting the light in a way that made them look like tiny stars. The fire in the fireplace was burning brightly, though I could have sworn it had been reduced to embers when I went to bed. And there, standing in front of the tree, was a figure I recognized instantly, though I had never seen him before. He was exactly as I had imagined him, and yet so much more. He was tall and broad, his red suit rich and velvety, trimmed with white fur that looked impossibly soft. His boots were black and polished, reaching up to his knees. His belt was wide and leather, with a buckle that gleamed like gold. But it was his face that captured my attention, held it, refused to let it go. He had a beard as white as fresh snow, full and long, and eyes that twinkled with kindness and wisdom and something that might have been mischief. His cheeks were rosy, his smile wide and genuine, and when he laughed, which he did as he placed presents under the tree, the sound filled the room and seemed to make everything brighter. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything but stare. He moved with surprising grace for someone of his size, arranging the presents with care, making sure each one was placed just so. He pulled things from a large sack that seemed impossibly full, no matter how many items he removed. I saw the bicycle I had wished for, gleaming red and perfect. I saw wrapped packages of all shapes and sizes, each one tagged with a name written in elegant script. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. It was cream-colored, made of thick paper that looked expensive and important. He held it for a moment, looking at it with an expression I could not quite read. It was sad, perhaps, or maybe wistful. He placed it carefully on the mantel above the fireplace, propping it against the stockings that hung there, making sure it would be seen. He stepped back and surveyed his work, nodding to himself with satisfaction. Then, as if sensing my presence, he turned and looked directly at me. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth, certain I was about to be scolded, or worse, put on some kind of naughty list that would haunt me forever. But he did not look angry. Instead, he smiled, a smile so warm and full of love that I felt tears spring to my eyes. He walked toward me, his boots making soft thuds on the wooden floor. He knelt down so that we were at eye level, and I could smell him, a scent of peppermint and pine and something else, something that reminded me of my grandfather who had passed away when I was very young. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the warmth of it through my thin pajamas. He spoke, and his voice was everything I had imagined it would be. Deep and rich, like hot chocolate on a cold day, like a favorite song, like coming home. He told me that I was a good boy, that he was proud of me, that I should always take care of my family, especially my little sister. He told me that Christmas was about more than presents, that it was about love and kindness and being together. He told me that the magic of Christmas lived in my heart, and that as long as I believed, as long as I held on to that magic, it would never fade. I wanted to ask him so many things. I wanted to know how he visited every house in one night, how his reindeer could fly, how he knew what everyone wanted. I wanted to know if the North Pole was real, if Mrs. Claus made cookies, if the elves were happy. But the words would not come. I could only nod, tears streaming down my cheeks, overwhelmed by the moment, by the reality of something I had always believed in but never truly expected to see. He stood up then, and I noticed for the first time that he looked tired. Not physically tired, but tired in a way that went deeper, a weariness that lived in his eyes despite his smile. He walked back to the fireplace and looked at the envelope he had placed on the mantel. He touched it gently, his fingers lingering on the paper, and then he looked back at me. He told me that the letter was for my family, that we should read it together on Christmas morning. He told me it was important, that it would explain things, that it would help us understand. I did not know what he meant, but I nodded anyway, committing his words to memory, knowing somehow that they mattered. He walked to the fireplace then, and I expected him to climb up the chimney, the way all the stories said he did. But instead, he simply stepped into the flames, and they seemed to embrace him, to wrap around him like a welcoming friend. The light grew brighter, so bright I had to shield my eyes, and when I looked again, he was gone. The fire had returned to its normal size, crackling peacefully, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. I stood there for a long time, trying to process what I had seen, trying to convince myself it had been real and not just a dream. The presents under the tree were proof, solid and tangible. The envelope on the mantel was proof, cream-colored and important-looking. But more than that, I could still feel the warmth of his hand on my shoulder, could still hear his voice in my ears, could still smell that scent of peppermint and pine. Eventually, I made my way back upstairs, my legs shaky, my mind racing. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin, staring at the ceiling, at the glow-in-the-dark stars that suddenly seemed less impressive after what I had just witnessed. I did not think I would be able to sleep, but exhaustion claimed me quickly, pulling me down into a deep, dreamless rest. I woke to Emma's squeals of delight. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and my sister was jumping on my bed, her small body full of boundless energy. She was shouting that Santa had come, that there were presents everywhere, that we had to go downstairs right now, immediately, without delay. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and for a moment, I wondered if the previous night had been a dream. But then I remembered the envelope, and I knew it had been real. We raced downstairs, Emma in the lead, her feet pounding on the steps, her laughter filling the house. My parents were already in the living room, my mother in her robe, her hair still messy from sleep, my father in his pajamas and slippers, a cup of coffee in his hand. They looked tired but happy, their faces glowing with the joy of seeing their children so excited. Emma dove for the presents, reading the tags, sorting them into piles, one for her, one for me, one for Mom, one for Dad. She was talking a mile a minute, her words tumbling over each other in her haste to get them all out. My mother laughed and told her to slow down, that we had all day, that there was no rush. But Emma could not be slowed, her excitement too great to be contained. I looked at the mantel and saw the envelope, exactly where Santa had placed it. It seemed to glow in the morning light, calling to me, demanding attention. I walked over to it and picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the texture of the expensive paper. My name was written on the front, along with my parents' names and Emma's, in that same elegant script I had seen on the present tags. I turned to my parents and held up the envelope. My mother's smile faltered, just for a moment, and I saw something flash across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion, or something else I could not identify. My father set down his coffee cup and walked over to me, taking the envelope gently from my hands. He looked at it for a long moment, his brow furrowed, and then he looked at my mother. She came over and took the envelope from him, turning it over in her hands, examining it as if it might hold some secret she could divine without opening it. Emma, oblivious to the sudden tension in the room, continued to sort presents, humming a Christmas carol to herself. My mother looked at my father, and they seemed to have an entire conversation without words, the way couples who have been together for years can do. Finally, my mother sat down on the couch and carefully opened the envelope. She pulled out several sheets of paper, the same cream color as the envelope, covered in that elegant handwriting. She began to read silently, her eyes moving across the page, and I watched as her expression changed. First confusion, then surprise, then something that looked like sadness mixed with wonder. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. My father sat down beside her and took the letter from her trembling hands. He read it as well, and I saw his jaw tighten, saw him blink rapidly, saw him take a deep, shaky breath. When he finished, he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw in his eyes something I had never seen before. It was love, yes, but also a kind of desperate gratitude, a fierce protectiveness, a determination that seemed to burn like fire. Emma finally noticed that something was happening. She stopped sorting presents and came over to us, climbing into my mother's lap, asking what was wrong, why everyone looked so sad on Christmas morning. My mother hugged her tightly, burying her face in Emma's hair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My father reached out and pulled me close, wrapping his arm around me, holding me against his side. He told us that the letter was from Santa, which we already knew, but that it was a very special letter, a very important letter. He said that Santa had written to tell us something, to help us understand something that was going to happen. His voice was thick with emotion, and he had to pause several times to collect himself. My mother lifted her head and wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself, trying to be strong for us. She began to read the letter aloud, her voice soft and wavering but determined. The letter started with a greeting, warm and personal, addressing each of us by name. Santa wrote that he had been watching our family for many years, that he knew us well, that he loved us dearly. He wrote that our family was special, that the love we shared was a rare and precious thing, that it shone like a beacon in a world that often felt dark and cold. Then the letter took a turn that I did not expect. Santa wrote that he knew about my father's illness. The word hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Illness. I looked at my father, at his face that suddenly seemed thinner than I remembered, at his eyes that held that weariness I had seen in Santa's eyes. My mother's hand found my father's, and they gripped each other tightly, as if holding on for dear life. Santa wrote that my father had been sick for several months, that he had been going to doctors, that he had been trying treatments, that he had been fighting with everything he had. He wrote that my parents had kept this secret from Emma and me because they wanted to protect us, because they wanted us to have a normal childhood, because they did not want us to be afraid. He wrote that they had planned to tell us after Christmas, but that he, Santa, felt we needed to know now, needed to understand, needed to be prepared. The letter explained that my father's illness was serious, that the treatments were not working as well as everyone had hoped, that the road ahead would be difficult. But Santa also wrote that my father was strong, that he was a fighter, that he would not give up. He wrote that our family's love was powerful, that it could sustain us through anything, that it could work miracles if we believed in it. Santa wrote about the importance of cherishing every moment, of not taking a single day for granted, of telling the people we love how much they mean to us. He wrote that Christmas was not just about presents and decorations and cookies, but about being together, about creating memories, about holding tight to the people who matter most. He wrote that the greatest gift we could give each other was our time, our attention, our love. He wrote specifically to me, telling me that I would need to be brave, that I would need to help my mother, that I would need to be a good big brother to Emma. He wrote that I was stronger than I knew, that I had a good heart, that I would grow up to be a fine man. He wrote that my father was proud of me, that he loved me more than words could express, that nothing would ever change that. He wrote to Emma, in simpler words that she could understand, telling her that she was a bright light in the world, that her joy and laughter were gifts to everyone around her. He told her to keep believing in magic, to keep seeing the wonder in everything, to keep loving with her whole heart. He told her that her daddy loved her to the moon and back, that he would always be with her, no matter what. He wrote to my mother, acknowledging her strength, her courage, her unwavering love. He wrote that she was the heart of our family, that she held us all together, that she was doing an incredible job even when she felt like she was failing. He wrote that she should not be afraid to ask for help, to lean on friends and family, to take care of herself as well as everyone else. He wrote that she was not alone, that she was loved, that she would get through this. And he wrote to my father, words that my mother could barely get through, her voice breaking with every sentence. He wrote that my father was a good man, a loving husband, a wonderful father. He wrote that my father had lived a life full of meaning, that he had touched countless lives, that he had made the world a better place. He wrote that whatever happened, my father should have no regrets, that he had done everything right, that his family would be okay because of the foundation he had built. The letter ended with a promise. Santa wrote that he would always watch over our family, that he would always be there in spirit, that the magic of Christmas would never leave us as long as we held on to love. He wrote that miracles could happen, that hope was never foolish, that faith could move mountains. He signed it simply, with love and belief, Santa Claus. When my mother finished reading, the room was silent except for the sound of our breathing, our sniffling, our quiet tears. Emma did not fully understand, I could tell, but she knew something important had happened, something that had made everyone sad. She hugged my mother tightly, patting her back the way my mother always patted hers when she was upset. I looked at my father, and he looked back at me, and in that moment, I grew up. I understood that life was not always fair, that bad things happened to good people, that the people we love could be taken from us. But I also understood that love was stronger than fear, that family was everything, that we would face whatever came together. My father pulled me into a hug, and I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the solidness of him, the warmth of him, trying to memorize everything about this moment. He whispered in my ear that he was sorry, that he had wanted to protect me, that he loved me so much it hurt. I told him I loved him too, that I was not afraid, that we would be okay. I did not know if I believed it, but I said it anyway, because I knew he needed to hear it. We spent the rest of that Christmas morning together, opening presents, but the joy was muted, tempered by the knowledge we now carried. The bicycle was beautiful, everything I had wanted, but it seemed less important now. The books and the model rocket kit and all the other gifts paled in comparison to the gift of time, the gift of knowing, the gift of being able to prepare. My mother made breakfast, pancakes and bacon and fresh orange juice, and we ate together at the kitchen table, the four of us, talking quietly, holding hands, being present with each other. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, muffling all sound, creating a sense of peace and isolation. It felt like we were the only people in the world, like nothing existed beyond the walls of our home, and in a way, that was comforting. The days that followed were different. We all knew that something had shifted, that our family had entered a new chapter, one that would be difficult and painful and transformative. My father continued his treatments, and we learned the vocabulary of illness, words like chemotherapy and radiation and prognosis. We learned to read his face for signs of how he was feeling, to adjust our expectations based on his energy levels, to celebrate the good days and endure the bad ones. But we also learned to live more fully. We stopped putting things off, stopped saying we would do something later, stopped taking each other for granted. My father and I built that telescope, and we spent countless nights looking at the stars, talking about the universe, about life, about everything and nothing. My mother taught Emma and me to bake, and our kitchen became a place of flower fights and laughter and cookies that were sometimes burnt but always made with love. We took trips, short ones that my father could manage, to places we had always talked about visiting but never had. We went to the beach and collected shells, feeling the sand between our toes, listening to the waves crash against the shore. We went to the mountains and hiked gentle trails, breathing in the crisp air, marveling at the views. We went to the city and visited museums, holding hands as we walked through galleries, discussing art and history and the human experience. We talked more, really talked, about important things and silly things and everything in between. My father told us stories from his childhood, about his parents and siblings, about the mischief he got into, about the lessons he learned. My mother shared her dreams, the ones she had achieved and the ones she had let go, and we told her it was not too late, that she could still do anything she wanted. Emma asked a million questions, her curiosity insatiable, and we answered every one with patience and honesty. We celebrated every holiday with extra enthusiasm, every birthday with extra cake, every ordinary day with extra gratitude. We said I love you constantly, the words becoming as natural as breathing, as necessary as air. We hugged more, touched more, made sure that physical affection was abundant and freely given. We took pictures, so many pictures, capturing moments we wanted to remember forever. The months passed, turning into a year, then two. My father's illness had its ups and downs, periods of remission followed by relapses, moments of hope followed by disappointment. But through it all, he remained himself, his spirit unbroken, his love unwavering. He lost his hair from the treatments, and Emma and I told him he looked like a superhero. He lost weight, his clothes hanging loose on his frame, but his hugs were still strong, still comforting. He tired easily, but he never complained, never gave up, never stopped fighting. I grew during those years, not just physically but emotionally. I learned about resilience and courage, about grace under pressure, about the power of a positive attitude. I learned that strength was not about never being afraid, but about being afraid and doing what needed to be done anyway. I learned that love was not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment, an action that you took every single day. Emma grew too, her understanding deepening as she got older. She stopped asking when Daddy would get better and started asking how she could help, what she could do to make things easier. She became his little nurse, bringing him water and blankets, reading to him when he was too tired to read himself, sitting quietly beside him when he needed rest. She never lost her joy, her ability to find wonder in the world, but it was tempered now with a wisdom beyond her years. My mother was the rock we all leaned on. She managed my father's medical appointments, kept track of his medications, communicated with doctors and insurance companies. She maintained our home, cooked our meals, helped with homework, attended school events. She worked part-time to help with the mounting medical bills, and she did it all with a smile, with grace, with a strength that seemed superhuman. But I saw the toll it took on her, the lines that appeared on her face, the gray that crept into her hair, the exhaustion that lived in her eyes. There were hard days, days when my father was too sick to get out of bed, when the pain was too much, when the treatments made him so ill that we wondered if they were worth it. There were days when my mother cried in the shower, thinking no one could hear her, but I did, and it broke my heart. There were days when Emma asked questions I did not know how to answer, when I felt the weight of being the big brother, the one who was supposed to have it together, the one who was supposed to be strong. But there were also beautiful days, days when my father felt good enough to play catch in the backyard, when we could pretend, just for a little while, that everything was normal. There were days when we laughed until our sides hurt, when we made memories that glowed bright and warm in my mind. There were days when I looked around at my family and felt such overwhelming love that I thought my heart might burst. Christmas came around again, and each one was precious in a way that our previous Christmases had not been. We decorated the tree together, my father directing from the couch, telling us where each ornament should go. We baked cookies, my father supervising, taste testing, declaring each batch the best he had ever had. We sang carols, my father's voice weaker than it used to be but still full of warmth and love. We read the nativity story, taking turns, each of us adding our own emphasis, our own interpretation. And each Christmas Eve, we would take out that letter from Santa, the one that had changed everything, and we would read it together. It became a tradition, a ritual, a way of remembering what was important. The paper grew soft and worn from handling, the creases deep from being folded and unfolded so many times. But the words never lost their power, never stopped moving us, never stopped reminding us to cherish each moment, to love fiercely, to believe in miracles. On the third Christmas after that fateful night when I saw Santa, my father's condition took a turn for the worse. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do, that we should make him comfortable, that we should prepare ourselves. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, final and irrevocable. My mother nodded, her face pale but composed, and asked what we needed to do, how we could help him, how we could make his remaining time as good as possible. We brought my father home from the hospital, setting up a bed in the living room so he could be part of everything, so he would not feel isolated or alone. Hospice nurses came and went, kind and gentle, helping us manage his pain, teaching us how to care for him. Friends and family visited, bringing food and flowers and prayers, sitting with us, sharing memories, saying goodbye in their own ways. My father was in and out of consciousness, the medication keeping him comfortable but also making him sleepy and confused. But there were moments of clarity, moments when his eyes would focus and he would smile, when he would reach for our hands and hold them tight. In those moments, we would talk to him, tell him we loved him, thank him for being such a wonderful father, such a wonderful husband, such a wonderful man. Christmas Eve arrived, and we knew it would likely be my father's last. The knowledge sat heavy in the room, a presence we could not ignore. But we were determined to make it special, to give him one more beautiful Christmas, one more night of magic and love and family. My mother decorated the living room, hanging lights and garland, making everything festive and bright. Emma and I made cookies, my father's favorites, chocolate chip with extra chips, just the way he liked them. We set up the Christmas tree right next to my father's bed so he could see it, so he could smell the pine, so he could be part of the tradition. We hung the ornaments, telling the stories behind each one, laughing and crying in equal measure. We strung the lights, and when we turned them on, the room glowed with that same golden warmth I remembered from that night 3 years ago. We sang carols, our voices soft and gentle, not wanting to tire my father but wanting him to hear, wanting him to be surrounded by music and love. He mouthed the words when he could, his eyes closed, a small smile on his lips. We read the nativity story, taking turns as always, and when it was my father's turn, I read his part for him, trying to use the same inflection he always used, trying to honor the tradition. Then my mother brought out the letter from Santa, and we read it together one last time. My voice broke on several passages, and Emma had to take over. My mother could barely get through the parts addressed to my father, her tears falling onto the worn paper, but she pushed through, determined to finish. When we were done, my father opened his eyes and looked at each of us in turn, his gaze full of love and gratitude and peace. He tried to speak, and we leaned in close to hear him. His voice was barely a whisper, weak and raspy, but the words were clear. He told us he loved us, that we were his everything, that he was so proud of the people we were. He told my mother she was the love of his life, his soulmate, his best friend. He told Emma she was his sunshine, his joy, his little miracle. He told me I was his son, his pride, his legacy, and that he knew I would take care of the family, that I would be the man he had raised me to be. He told us not to be sad, that he had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and meaning. He told us that he would always be with us, in our hearts, in our memories, in the lessons he had taught us. He told us to keep celebrating Christmas, to keep reading the letter, to keep believing in magic and miracles and the power of love. He told us to be happy, to live fully, to not waste a single moment on regret or sorrow. We stayed with him through the night, the four of us together, holding hands, telling stories, sharing memories, laughing through our tears. We told him about our favorite moments with him, the times he had made us laugh, the times he had comforted us, the times he had been exactly what we needed. We thanked him for everything he had given us, for the life he had built, for the love he had shown us every single day. As the night wore on, my father's breathing became more labored, more irregular. The hospice nurse, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, came over and checked his vitals. She looked at my mother and gave a small, sad nod. My mother understood, and she gathered us close, telling us it was time to say goodbye, that Daddy was going to go be with the angels, that he would not hurt anymore, that he would be at peace. Emma climbed onto the bed and curled up next to my father, her small body pressed against his side, her head on his chest. I sat on the other side, holding his hand, feeling the coolness of his skin, the weakness of his grip. My mother sat at the head of the bed, cradling my father's head in her lap, stroking his hair, whispering words of love and comfort. We told him it was okay to go, that we would be okay, that we would take care of each other. We told him we loved him, over and over, a mantra, a prayer, a promise. We told him to look for the light, to go toward it, to not be afraid. We told him we would see him again someday, that this was not goodbye forever, just goodbye for now. And then, as the first light of Christmas morning began to filter through the windows, as the world outside started to wake, my father took one last breath and let it out slowly. His body relaxed, the tension leaving his face, and he looked peaceful, younger somehow, free from pain and suffering. The room was silent, heavy with grief and love and the weight of loss. My mother let out a sob, pressing her face against my father's, her tears falling onto his still face. Emma cried quietly, her small body shaking with the force of her sorrow. I sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened, unable to accept that my father was gone, that he would never hug me again, never tell me he was proud of me, never be there to guide me through life. The hospice nurse came over and gently checked for a pulse, for breathing, confirming what we already knew. She was kind and respectful, giving us time, not rushing us, understanding that we needed these moments to begin the process of letting go. She made some phone calls, speaking in low tones, arranging for what came next, handling the practical details that we could not think about. We stayed with my father for a long time, none of us wanting to leave him, none of us ready to face a world without him in it. We held him, touched him, memorized every detail of his face, his hands, his presence. We told him we loved him, even though he could no longer hear us, because we needed to say it, needed to feel the words leave our lips one more time. Eventually, people came to take my father's body away. My mother signed papers, answered questions, moved through the motions like a robot, her face blank, her eyes empty. Emma and I clung to each other, watching as they wheeled my father out of our home, out of our lives, leaving behind an emptiness that felt impossible to fill. The days that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements and visitors and casseroles that people brought because they did not know what else to do. The service was beautiful, full of music and flowers and stories about my father's life. So many people came, more than I had realized knew him, loved him, would miss him. They told us how much he had meant to them, how he had helped them, how he had made their lives better. It was comforting and heartbreaking all at once. We buried my father on a cold, gray day, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened snow but never delivered. We stood at the graveside, the four of us, along with extended family and friends, and watched as they lowered the casket into the ground. My mother placed a single red rose on top, her hand lingering for a moment before she stepped back. Emma and I each placed a rose as well, saying our own private goodbyes, making our own private promises. Life after my father's death was strange and difficult. The house felt too quiet, too empty, too full of memories that hurt to remember but that we could not bear to forget. We moved through our days in a fog, going through the motions, trying to figure out how to be a family of three when we had always been four. My mother went back to work, needing the distraction, needing the income, needing something to focus on besides her grief. Emma and I went back to school, facing the sympathetic looks and awkward condolences of classmates and teachers who did not know what to say. But slowly, gradually, we began to heal. We talked about my father constantly, sharing memories, telling stories, keeping him alive in our conversations. We looked at pictures, watched old home videos, laughed at his jokes and his quirks and the things that had made him uniquely him. We cried too, often and without warning, triggered by a song or a smell or a random moment that reminded us of what we had lost. We leaned on each other, supporting and comforting, being there in ways we had not known we could be. I stepped up, taking on more responsibilities, helping my mother with household tasks, looking after Emma, trying to be the man my father had believed I could be. Emma found ways to bring joy into our lives, her laughter and her optimism a balm for our wounded hearts. My mother showed us what strength looked like, what resilience meant, what it was to keep going even when you wanted to give up. Christmas came around again, the first one without my father, and we debated whether to celebrate at all. It felt wrong somehow, to put up decorations and sing carols and exchange gifts when the person who had made Christmas magical was gone. But then we remembered the letter, remembered what Santa had written, remembered what my father had told us on his last night. He had wanted us to keep celebrating, to keep believing, to keep living. So we put up the tree, and it was hard, so hard, to hang the ornaments without him, to remember all the stories he used to tell. We baked cookies, and they did not taste quite right without him there to taste test and offer suggestions. We sang carols, and there was a hole in our harmony where his deep voice used to be. We read the nativity story, and I read his part again, my voice stronger this time, more confident, trying to honor him by carrying on the tradition. And we read the letter from Santa, the one that had prepared us, that had given us 3 precious years to love my father fully, to make memories, to say everything that needed to be said. We read it through tears, but also through smiles, grateful for the gift it had been, for the warning it had provided, for the wisdom it had imparted. We understood now, in a way we had not before, that Santa's visit had been a miracle, that the letter had been a blessing, that we had been given something precious and rare. As we sat together on Christmas Eve, the 3 of us, I thought about that night so many years ago when I had seen Santa, when he had knelt down and spoken to me, when he had placed that letter on the mantel. I thought about the sadness I had seen in his eyes, the weariness, and I understood it now. He had known what was coming, had known the pain we would face, and it had hurt him to know it, to be unable to prevent it, to only be able to prepare us. But he had also given us a gift more valuable than any toy or game or material thing. He had given us time, awareness, the ability to make the most of every moment. He had given us the knowledge that love was what mattered, that family was everything, that memories were treasures that could never be taken away. He had given us the strength to face the hardest thing we would ever face, and to come through it still believing in magic, still believing in miracles, still believing in the power of love. Years passed, and life moved forward as it always does. I grew up, graduated from high school, went to college. I studied hard, worked hard, tried to make my father proud even though he was not there to see it. I thought about him every day, talked to him in my head, asked him for advice when I faced difficult decisions. I felt his presence in my life, guiding me, supporting me, loving me from wherever he was. Emma grew up too, blossoming into a beautiful, kind, compassionate young woman. She never lost her joy, her ability to see the good in people, her belief in magic. She talked about our father often, keeping his memory alive, making sure that anyone who knew or knew about him, knew what an amazing person he had been. She chose to become a nurse, inspired by the hospice workers who had cared for our father, wanting to help other families the way they had helped ours. My mother remained strong, though I knew she carried her grief with her always, a weight that never fully lifted. She dated occasionally, but never seriously, saying that she had already had the love of her life, that no one could ever replace my father. She threw herself into her work, into her hobbies, into being the best mother and grandmother she could be. She was our rock, our anchor, our reminder of what love looked like in action. I got married eventually, to a wonderful woman who understood about my father, who listened to my stories, who wished she could have met him. We had children, a boy and a girl, and I named my son after my father, wanting to honor him, wanting to keep his name alive. I told my children about their grandfather, about the kind of man he was, about the lessons he taught me. I showed them pictures, played them videos, made sure they knew him even though they had never met him. And every Christmas, without fail, we would gather together, my mother and Emma and my family, and we would read the letter from Santa. It had become a family tradition, passed down, sacred and precious. The paper was fragile now, yellowed with age, the creases so deep they threatened to tear. But the words were still clear, still powerful, still able to move us to tears and remind us of what mattered. My children loved the tradition, loved hearing about the night I saw Santa, loved the idea that magic was real and that miracles could happen. They asked questions, so many questions, about their grandfather, about the letter, about what it all meant. And I answered them as honestly as I could, telling them that sometimes life was hard, that sometimes we lost people we loved, but that love itself never died, that it lived on in memories and stories and the lessons we carried forward. I told them that Santa's letter had taught us to cherish every moment, to never take the people we love for granted, to say I love you as often as possible. I told them that it had taught us that the greatest gifts were not things we could wrap and put under a tree, but time and attention and presence. I told them that it had taught us that even in the darkest times, there was light, there was hope, there was love. One Christmas Eve, when my son was 8 years old, the same age I had been when I saw Santa, he asked me if Santa was real. It was the question every parent dreads, the one that marks the end of a certain kind of innocence. I looked at my wife, and she gave me a small nod, leaving the decision to me. I looked at my mother, and she smiled, her eyes full of memories and love. I looked at Emma, and she winked, trusting me to say the right thing. I knelt down so I was at eye level with my son, the way Santa had knelt down with me all those years ago. I told him that Santa was real in all the ways that mattered. I told him that Santa represented the spirit of giving, of kindness, of believing in magic and miracles. I told him that Santa lived in the hearts of people who loved each other, who took care of each other, who made the world a better place. I told him that as long as he believed in those things, Santa would always be real. My son thought about this for a moment, his young face serious and contemplative. Then he asked if I had ever seen Santa, and I told him yes, I had, once, on a night very much like this one. I told him about the golden light, about the red suit and white beard, about the eyes that twinkled with kindness and wisdom. I told him about the letter, about how it had changed our family, about how it had prepared us for the hardest thing we would ever face. I told him about his grandfather, about what an amazing man he had been, about how much he would have loved to meet him. I told him that the letter had given us 3 years to love his grandfather fully, to make memories, to say goodbye properly. I told him that it was the greatest gift anyone had ever given us, because it had taught us what really mattered in life. My son listened intently, his eyes wide, taking in every word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that he hoped Santa would visit him someday, that he would leave a letter for our family too. I told him that Santa visited in different ways, that sometimes the magic was obvious and sometimes it was subtle, but that it was always there if you knew how to look for it. That night, after the children were in bed, after the presents were arranged under the tree, after the cookies were eaten and the milk was drunk, I stood in front of the fireplace and looked at the mantel. I thought about that Christmas Eve so many years ago, about the boy I had been, about the man I had become. I thought about my father, about how much I missed him, about how grateful I was for the time we had had together. I felt a presence then, warm and comforting, and I knew somehow that my father was there with me, that he had never really left, that he was always watching over us. I felt Santa's presence too, that jolly spirit of Christmas, that embodiment of love and giving and belief. And I felt gratitude, overwhelming and profound, for the gift I had been given, for the letter that had changed everything, for the magic that had sustained us through the darkest times. I whispered thank you into the quiet room, not sure who I was thanking, maybe Santa, maybe God, maybe the universe itself. Thank you for the warning, for the time, for the love, for the strength to endure. Thank you for my father, for the years we had with him, for the lessons he taught us, for the love he showed us. Thank you for my family, for my mother's strength, for Emma's joy, for my wife's understanding, for my children's innocence and wonder. And as I stood there, I felt a peace settle over me, a sense that everything was as it should be, that we had honored my father's memory, that we had lived the way he wanted us to live. I felt connected to something larger than myself, to a tradition that stretched back generations and would continue forward through my children and their children. I felt the magic of Christmas, not in presents or decorations, but in love and family and the bonds that could never be broken. The fire in the fireplace flickered and danced, casting shadows on the walls, and for just a moment, I thought I saw a figure there, tall and broad, dressed in red. I blinked, and it was gone, but the feeling remained, the sense of being watched over, of being loved, of being part of something magical and eternal. I went to bed that night with a full heart, grateful for the life I had been given, for the people I loved, for the memories I carried. I thought about the letter, about the words that had guided us through the hardest years of our lives, about the wisdom that had sustained us. I thought about my father, about his smile and his laugh and his unwavering love. I thought about Santa, about that night when magic had been real and tangible and life-changing. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the magic was still real, that miracles still happened, that love was the most powerful force in the universe. I knew that my father was at peace, that he was proud of us, that he was still with us in all the ways that mattered. I knew that we would be okay, that we would continue to honor his memory, that we would keep believing, keep loving, keep living fully. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the sun reflecting off the snow that had fallen during the night, making everything sparkle like diamonds. My children woke early, their excitement palpable, their joy infectious. We gathered around the tree, my whole family, 3 generations united by love and tradition and the magic of Christmas. We opened presents, and there was laughter and surprise and gratitude. We ate breakfast together, pancakes and bacon and fresh orange juice, the same meal my mother had made all those years ago. We told stories and shared memories and took pictures, capturing moments we would treasure forever. And later, when the excitement had died down and the wrapping paper had been cleaned up, we gathered in the living room for our most important tradition. My mother brought out the letter, handling it with the reverence it deserved. We passed it around, each person holding it for a moment, feeling the weight of its history, the power of its words. Then I read it aloud, my voice steady and strong, infused with all the love and gratitude I felt. My children listened intently, my son with his serious face, my daughter with tears in her eyes. My wife held my hand, squeezing it gently, supporting me as she always did. Emma and my mother held each other, their bond as strong as ever, forged in the fires of loss and strengthened by love. When I finished reading, we sat in silence for a moment, letting the words sink in, letting them do their work. Then my son spoke up, his young voice clear and confident. He said that he understood now why the letter was so important, why we read it every year. He said that it reminded us to love each other, to be grateful for what we have, to never take anything for granted. He said that even though he had never met his grandfather, he felt like he knew him, because we talked about him so much, because his love was still present in our family. My daughter, younger and more emotional, said that she wished she could have met her grandfather, that she wished he could have held her and told her stories and taught her things. My mother told her that her grandfather was watching over her, that he loved her even though he had never met her, that his love transcended time and space and death itself. She told her that every time she felt loved, every time she felt safe, every time she felt joy, that was her grandfather's love reaching her. We talked for a long time, sharing our feelings, our memories, our hopes for the future. We talked about what the letter meant to each of us, how it had shaped our lives, how it continued to guide us. We talked about my father, about the man he had been, about the legacy he had left. We talked about Santa, about magic and miracles and the power of belief. And as we sat there together, I realized that this was what my father had wanted, what Santa had known we needed. Not just the warning about what was coming, but the reminder of what was important. Not just the preparation for loss, but the celebration of love. Not just the knowledge that life was finite, but the understanding that love was infinite. The letter had been a gift, yes, but not in the way I had originally thought. It was not just about giving us time to say goodbye, though that had been precious beyond measure. It was about teaching us how to live, how to love, how to be present in every moment. It was about showing us that magic was real, that miracles happened every day, that the greatest power in the universe was the love we shared with each other. I looked around at my family, at the faces I loved more than anything in the world, and I felt my father's presence so strongly it was almost physical. I felt his pride, his love, his approval. I felt him smiling down on us, happy that we had carried on, that we had honored his memory, that we had lived the way he wanted us to live. I felt him in the warmth of the room, in the laughter of my children, in the strength of my mother, in the joy of my sister, in the love of my wife. And I understood, finally and completely, what Santa had been trying to tell me that night so many years ago. The magic of Christmas was not about flying reindeer or toys made by elves or a jolly man in a red suit. The magic of Christmas was about love, pure and simple. It was about family, about being together, about creating memories and traditions that would last forever. It was about believing in something bigger than yourself, about having faith that even in the darkest times, there was light, there was hope, there was love. The letter had taught us that. My father had lived that. And we would carry it forward, passing it down to our children and their children, keeping the magic alive, keeping the love alive, keeping the memory alive. We would continue to read the letter every Christmas, to remember what mattered, to honor the gift we had been given. We would continue to love fiercely, to live fully, to believe in miracles. Because that was what the letter had really been about. Not death, but life. Not loss, but love. Not endings, but beginnings. It had been about understanding that every moment was precious, that every person was a gift, that every day was an opportunity to show love, to create joy, to make memories. It had been about learning to live with intention, with gratitude, with awareness of how fleeting and beautiful life truly was. My father had known that, had lived that, had taught us that. And Santa, in his infinite wisdom and compassion, had given us the tools to understand it, to embrace it, to carry it forward. The letter had been a bridge between the magical thinking of childhood and the harsh realities of adulthood, a way to hold on to belief while facing loss, a reminder that love was stronger than death. As the day wore on and evening approached, we continued our Christmas traditions. We played games, we watched movies, we ate too much food and laughed too hard and enjoyed every single moment. We were present, fully and completely, not thinking about tomorrow or yesterday, but living in the now, in the joy of being together, in the magic of the day. When it was time for my family to leave, when we had to pack up the kids and head home, the goodbyes were long and full of love. We hugged tightly, we said I love you multiple times, we made plans for when we would see each other again. My mother held my children close, kissing their foreheads, telling them how much she loved them. Emma hugged my wife, thanking her for being part of our family, for understanding about the letter and the traditions and the importance of it all. And when my mother hugged me, she whispered in my ear that my father would be so proud of the man I had become, of the father I was, of the way I had honored his memory. She told me that I was doing everything right, that I was keeping the magic alive, that I was passing on the most important lessons. Her words filled me with warmth and pride and a deep sense of peace. On the drive home, my children fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement of the day. My wife and I drove in comfortable silence, holding hands across the center console, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I thought about the letter, about my father, about the journey our family had been on. I thought about how much we had lost, but also how much we had gained. We had lost my father's physical presence, but we had gained a deeper understanding of love, of family, of what really mattered in life. We had learned to cherish every moment, to not put things off, to say what needed to be said when it needed to be said. We had learned that life was unpredictable, that we could not control everything, but that we could control how we responded, how we loved, how we lived. We had learned that grief and joy could coexist, that you could miss someone desperately and still find happiness, that love did not end with death but continued on, transformed but undiminished. These were the lessons of the letter, the gifts that Santa had given us. And they were lessons I would pass on to my children, just as my father had passed them on to me. I would teach them to love fiercely, to live fully, to believe in magic and miracles. I would teach them that family was everything, that memories were treasures, that the greatest gift you could give someone was your time and attention and presence. I would teach them about their grandfather, about the kind of man he was, about the legacy he left. I would make sure they knew that they came from love, that they were part of a family that valued kindness and compassion in being there for each other. I would make sure they understood that even though life could be hard, even though we would face losses and challenges and heartbreak, we would face it together, and that together, we could get through anything. And I would teach them about that Christmas Eve when I was 8 years old, when I saw Santa, when he left a letter that changed everything. I would teach them that magic was real, that miracles happened, that sometimes we were given gifts we did not know we needed until we received them. I would teach them to be grateful, to be present, to believe. Because that was what the letter had taught us, what my father had shown us, what we would carry forward into the future. Belief. Not blind belief, not naive belief, but belief grounded in love and experience and the knowledge that we were part of something larger than ourselves. Belief that love was stronger than death, that family was forever, that the magic of Christmas lived in our hearts and could never be taken away. As we pulled into our driveway, as I carried my sleeping children into the house and tucked them into their beds, as I kissed their foreheads and whispered "I love you," I felt my father's presence again. I felt his hand on my shoulder, the way Santa's hand had been on my shoulder all those years ago. I felt his approval, his love, his pride. And I felt grateful, so incredibly grateful, for the gift I had been given, for the time I had had with him, for the lessons he had taught me. I went to my own room and got ready for bed, moving quietly so as not to wake my wife who had already fallen asleep. I looked out the window at the night sky, at the stars that twinkled like the lights on a Christmas tree, at the moon that glowed with a soft, gentle light. And I thought about Santa, about whether he was out there somewhere, watching over families, leaving letters for those who needed them, spreading magic and love and hope. I did not know if I would ever see him again, if that one night had been a once-in-a-lifetime experience or if there was a chance, however small, that he might return. But it did not matter. What mattered was that he had come when we needed him, that he had given us what we needed, that he had changed our lives in the most profound way possible. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would spend the rest of my life honoring that gift. I would live the way my father had lived, with love and kindness and generosity. I would raise my children the way I had been raised, with values and traditions and an understanding of what really mattered. I would keep the magic alive, keep the belief alive, keep the love alive. Because that was what the letter had been about, what Santa had wanted us to understand, what my father had lived and breathed every day of his life. Love. Simple, profound, transformative love. The kind of love that sustained you through the darkest times, that lifted you up when you were down, that connected you to something eternal and unbreakable. The kind of love that made life worth living, that made loss bearable, that made magic real. I climbed into bed and closed my eyes, and I could still see that golden light from all those years ago, could still feel the warmth of Santa's hand on my shoulder, could still hear his voice telling me that the magic lived in my heart. And I knew it was true. The magic did live in my heart, and in the hearts of everyone I loved, and it would continue to live there, passed down through generations, a gift that kept on giving. I thought about the letter one more time, about the words that had guided us, sustained us, transformed us. I thought about how a single piece of paper, a single act of kindness, a single moment of magic could change everything. I thought about how grateful I was, how blessed I felt, how much I had learned about what it meant to truly live. And as I drifted off to sleep, I whispered one more thank you into the darkness. Thank you for the letter. Thank you for the warning. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the magic. Thank you for everything. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, creating that same sense of peace and possibility that I remembered from that Christmas Eve so long ago. The house was quiet, filled with the gentle sounds of my family sleeping, safe and warm and loved. And somewhere, I like to think, Santa was smiling, knowing that his gift had been received, had been understood, had been honored. The letter remained in our family, carefully preserved, a sacred relic of a moment that had changed everything. We kept it in a special box, lined with velvet, protected from the elements and the passage of time. We only took it out once a year, on Christmas Eve, to read it together, to remember, to honor the gift we had been given. And each year, as we read those words, they felt as fresh and powerful as they had the first time, as if they were being written anew just for us, just for that moment. My children grew, and they brought friends home for Christmas, and those friends became part of our tradition, part of our family. They listened to the story of the letter, they heard about my father, they felt the love that permeated our home. And many of them told us later that it had changed them, that it had made them think about their own families, their own relationships, their own priorities. They said it had reminded them of what was important, of what they should be grateful for, of how they wanted to live their lives. And that, I realized, was the true magic of the letter. It was not just for us, not just for our family. It was a message that could touch anyone who heard it, anyone who was open to its wisdom, anyone who needed to be reminded of what really mattered. It was a gift that kept on giving, spreading outward in ripples, touching lives in ways we could not even imagine. Years turned into decades, and I grew older, my hair turning gray, my body slowing down. My children had children of their own, and suddenly I was a grandfather, a role I had never imagined I would be blessed enough to fill. I thought about my own father, about how much he would have loved to meet his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. I thought about how proud he would be of the family we had built, of the traditions we had maintained, of the love we had nurtured. And I made sure that my grandchildren knew about him, that they heard the stories, that they understood where they came from. I told them about that Christmas Eve when I was 8 years old, when I saw Santa, when everything changed. I showed them the letter, let them hold it carefully in their small hands, let them feel the weight of its history. And I watched as their eyes grew wide with wonder, as they asked questions, as they tried to understand the magic of it all. One Christmas, when I was in my 70s, my health began to fail. Nothing dramatic, just the slow decline that comes with age, the body wearing out, systems shutting down. I knew what was happening, knew what was coming, and I was not afraid. I had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and meaning. I had honored my father's memory, had passed on his lessons, had kept the magic alive. I had done what I set out to do, and I was at peace. My family gathered around me that Christmas, all of them, children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, just the way I liked it. We decorated the tree together, for generations working side by side, hanging ornaments and stringing lights and creating memories. We baked cookies, the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and sugar and vanilla. We sang carols, our voices blending together in harmony, creating something beautiful and sacred. And on Christmas Eve, we gathered in the living room for our tradition. My oldest grandchild, a young man now, brought out the letter with the reverence it deserved. He held it carefully, understanding its importance, its power, its history. And he began to read, his voice strong and clear, filled with emotion and love. As I listened to those familiar words, words I had heard every Christmas for more than 60 years, I felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. I thought about that 8-year-old boy I had been, standing at the bottom of the stairs, watching Santa place the letter on the mantel. I thought about the journey I had been on, the losses I had endured, the love I had experienced, the life I had lived. And I felt grateful, so incredibly grateful, for all of it. For my father, who had taught me how to be a man, how to love, how to live. For my mother, who had shown me strength and resilience and grace. For Emma, who had been my companion through the hardest times, who had never lost her joy or her belief in magic. For my wife, who had loved me unconditionally, who had supported me through everything, who had been my partner in every sense of the word. For my children, who had brought me such pride and happiness, who had carried on the traditions, who had honored the legacy. For my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, who represented the future, who would carry the love forward, who would keep the magic alive. When the reading was finished, when the last word had been spoken, I looked around at all the faces I loved, and I knew it was time. Time to tell them what I had been thinking, what I had been feeling, what I needed them to know. I cleared my throat, and the room fell silent, everyone turning to look at me, sensing that something important was about to happen. I told them that I loved them, each and every one of them, more than words could express. I told them that they had made my life meaningful, that they had given me purpose, that they had been my greatest joy. I told them that I was proud of them, of the people they had become, of the love they showed each other, of the way they had embraced the traditions and the lessons and the magic. I told them that I was not afraid of what was coming, that I had lived a good life, that I had no regrets. I told them that I would be with my father soon, that I would see him again, that I would tell him all about them, about the family we had built, about the love we had nurtured. I told them that I would watch over them, just as my father had watched over me, just as Santa had promised to watch over us all. I told them to keep reading the letter, to keep honoring the tradition, to keep believing in magic and miracles and the power of love. I told them that the letter was not just about my father's death, but about how to live, how to love, how to be present in every moment. I told them that it was the most important thing I could pass on to them, more valuable than any material possession, more precious than any amount of money. I told them to take care of each other, to be there for each other, to never take each other for granted. I told them that family was everything, that love was the only thing that mattered, that they should live every day with intention and gratitude and awareness of how blessed they were. I told them to say I love you often, to hug tightly, to create memories, to be present. And then I told them about that night, about seeing Santa, about the details I had never shared before. I told them about the sadness in his eyes, about the weariness, about how he had known what was coming and had tried to prepare us. I told them about the warmth of his hand on my shoulder, about the sound of his voice, about the smell of peppermint and pine. I told them about how he had stepped into the flames and disappeared, about how the light had been so bright I had to shield my eyes. I told them that I believed, truly believed, that Santa was real, that magic was real, that miracles happened every day if you knew how to look for them. I told them that the letter had been a miracle, that it had saved us in ways we could not even fully understand, that it had given us the tools to face the hardest thing we would ever face and come through it still believing, still loving, still living. And I told them that I hoped, when my time came, that they would remember the lessons of the letter, that they would honor my memory the way we had honored my father's, that they would keep the love alive, keep the magic alive, keep the tradition alive. I told them that death was not the end, that love transcended death, that I would always be with them in their hearts, in their memories, in the lessons I had taught them. When I finished speaking, there was not a dry eye in the room. My children hugged me, my grandchildren climbed onto my lap, my great-grandchildren touched my hands with their tiny fingers. We sat together for a long time, holding each other, crying and laughing, sharing memories and making promises. And I felt such peace, such contentment, such gratitude for the life I had lived, for the love I had known, for the family I had been blessed with. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, after the house had grown quiet, I sat alone in the living room, looking at the Christmas tree, at the lights that twinkled like stars, at the ornaments that held so many memories. I thought about my father, about how much I missed him, about how much I was looking forward to seeing him again. I thought about Santa, about that magical night that had changed everything, about the gift that had kept on giving for more than 60 years. And then I felt it, that presence I had felt so many times over the years. Warm and comforting, familiar and beloved. I looked toward the fireplace, and there, in the flickering light of the flames, I saw him. Santa. He looked exactly as he had all those years ago, unchanged by time, eternal and magical. His eyes twinkled with that same kindness and wisdom, his smile was warm and genuine, his presence filled the room with light and love. He walked toward me, and I stood to meet him, my old body moving slowly but surely. He placed his hand on my shoulder, just as he had when I was 8 years old, and I felt the warmth of it, the comfort, the love. He told me that I had done well, that I had honored the gift, that I had lived the way I was meant to live. He told me that my father was proud, that he was waiting for me, that it would not be long now. He told me that the letter would continue, that my family would keep the tradition, that the magic would never die as long as they kept believing, kept loving, kept living with intention and gratitude. He told me that I had been a good steward of the gift, that I had passed it on faithfully, that the ripples of love I had created would continue outward, touching lives for generations to come. I asked him why he had come to me all those years ago, why he had chosen our family, why he had given us the letter. He smiled, and his eyes grew soft with compassion. He told me that he came to families who needed him, who were facing darkness, who needed light and hope and love. He told me that he could not prevent suffering, could not stop death, could not change the course of fate. But he could prepare people, could give them tools, could remind them of what mattered. He told me that the letter was not just for us, but for everyone who heard our story, everyone who learned from our example, everyone who was reminded by our experience to cherish their loved ones, to live fully, to believe in magic. He told me that our family had been a light in the darkness, that our love had inspired others, that our story had touched countless lives in ways we would never know. And then he told me something that took my breath away. He told me that when my time came, when I passed from this world to the next, I would have a choice. I could go to my rest, to my reward, to be reunited with my father and all those I had loved and lost. Or I could join him, could become part of the magic, could help other families the way he had helped mine. He told me that it was not a decision I had to make now, that I would know when the time came, that my heart would guide me. I looked at him, at this magical being who had changed my life, who had given me the greatest gift I had ever received, and I felt such love, such gratitude, such awe. I told him thank you, the words inadequate but sincere. Thank you for the letter, for the warning, for the time, for the love, for the magic, for everything. He smiled and squeezed my shoulder, and I felt a warmth spread through my body, a peace settle over my soul. He told me it was time for him to go, that he had other families to visit, other letters to deliver, other lives to touch. He walked back to the fireplace, and just as he had all those years ago, he stepped into the flames. the light grew bright, so bright, and I had to shield my eyes. And when I looked again, he was gone, and I was alone in the quiet room, the fire crackling peacefully, the tree lights twinkling softly. I sat back down, my heart full, my mind at peace. I knew what was coming, knew that my time was short, but I was not afraid. I had lived well, loved well, done what I was meant to do. I had honored my father's memory, had passed on his lessons, had kept the magic alive. And now, I would go to my rest, or perhaps to something more, something magical and eternal and full of purpose. I closed my eyes and let the peace wash over me, let the love surround me, let the magic fill me. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that everything was as it should be, that the circle was complete, that the story that had begun on that snowy Christmas Eve so many years ago was coming to its natural conclusion. But not quite yet. There was still Christmas morning to enjoy, still presents to open, still breakfast to share, still memories to make. There was still time to hold my great-grandchildren, to tell them I loved them, to see their faces light up with joy. There was still time to hug my children, to thank them for the lives they had built, to tell them how proud I was. There was still time to kiss my wife, to hold her hand, to look into her eyes and see reflected there all the years we had shared, all the love we had known. And so I would take that time, would cherish every moment, would be present and grateful and full of love. Because that was what the letter had taught me, what my father had shown me, what I would carry with me into whatever came next. Life was precious, love was eternal, and every moment was a gift to be treasured. I opened my eyes and looked at the Christmas tree one more time, at the ornaments that told the story of our family, at the lights that glowed with warmth and promise. I looked at the mantel where the letter had first appeared, where it had changed everything, where magic had become real. And I smiled, feeling my father's presence, feeling Santa's love, feeling the connection to something larger and more beautiful than I could fully comprehend. The snow continued to fall outside, soft and steady, covering the world in white, creating that sense of peace and possibility that I had always associated with Christmas. The house was warm and quiet, filled with the gentle sounds of my family sleeping, safe and loved and blessed. And I sat there in the darkness, in the glow of the Christmas tree, feeling grateful, feeling peaceful, feeling complete. I thought about all the Christmases I had known, all the memories I had made, all the love I had experienced. I thought about my father, about the 3 years we had been given after the letter, about how we had made every moment count. I thought about my own life, about the decades I had been blessed with, about the family I had raised, about the legacy I was leaving behind. And I knew that the letter would continue, that the tradition would be maintained, that the magic would live on. My children would read it to their children, and their children would read it to their children, and on, generation after generation. The paper would eventually crumble, perhaps, but the words would be memorized, the message would be preserved, the love would be passed down. And maybe, just maybe, Santa would visit one of my descendants someday, would leave another letter, would touch another life the way he had touched mine. Maybe the magic would continue to spread, to grow, to transform lives and families and hearts. Maybe our story would inspire others to live more fully, to love more deeply, to believe more strongly. That was my hope, my prayer, my legacy. Not wealth or fame or material success, but love. Simple, profound, transformative love. The kind of love that my father had shown me, that I had tried to show my family, that would continue on long after I was gone. The kind of love that made life worth living, that made loss bearable, that made magic real. I sat there for a long time, lost in thought, lost in memory, lost in gratitude. And eventually, I felt sleep pulling at me, gentle and insistent. I stood slowly, my old bones creaking, and made my way to bed. I climbed in beside my wife, who stirred slightly and reached for my hand, holding it even in sleep. And I closed my eyes, feeling loved, feeling blessed, feeling ready for whatever came next. Christmas morning dawned bright and beautiful, and I woke to the sound of children's laughter, to the smell of coffee brewing, to the warmth of my wife beside me. I got up and joined my family, and we celebrated together, opening presents and eating breakfast and being together. And it was perfect, absolutely perfect, a Christmas morning filled with love and joy and magic. The days after Christmas passed peacefully. I spent time with my family, soaking up every moment, storing up memories to take with me. I told more stories, shared more wisdom, made sure that everything I wanted to say had been said. And my family, sensing that time was short, stayed close, surrounding me with love and care and attention. One evening, about a week after Christmas, as I sat in my favorite chair by the fireplace, I felt a change come over me. It was not painful, not frightening, just a gentle shifting, a sense of letting go. My family was gathered around me, and I looked at each of them, memorizing their faces, feeling such overwhelming love that it brought tears to my eyes. I told them one more time that I loved them, that they had made my life beautiful, that I was so grateful for every moment we had shared. I told them not to be sad, that I was going to be with my Father, that I was at peace, that I was ready. I told them to keep the traditions, to keep the love alive, to keep believing in magic. And then I closed my eyes, and I felt myself drifting, floating, moving toward a light that was warm and welcoming and full of love. I heard my Father's voice calling to me, and I moved toward it, eager to see him again, to hug him, to tell him everything. I felt Santa's presence too, that magical being who had changed my life, and I knew that the choice he had offered me was coming, that I would soon have to decide. But for now, I just moved toward the light, toward the love, toward the peace that awaited me. I felt my body falling away, felt the pain and weariness of age disappearing, felt myself becoming lighter, freer, more myself than I had ever been. And I felt joy, pure and uncomplicated, the joy of coming home, of being reunited, of moving into whatever came next. I heard my family crying, heard them saying goodbye, heard them telling me they loved me. And I wanted to tell them not to cry, that I was okay, that I was more than okay, that I was experiencing something beautiful and sacred and full of wonder. But I could not speak, could only feel, could only move forward into the light. And then I was there, in a place that was not quite a place, surrounded by love and light and peace. And my Father was there, looking young and healthy and whole, his arms open wide, his smile bright and welcoming. I ran to him, or floated to him, or simply appeared in his embrace, and we held each other, and I felt complete in a way I had not felt since he died. He told me he was proud of me, that I had done everything right, that I had honored his memory and his lessons. He told me that he had been watching over me, over all of us, that he had seen everything, that he had been there in spirit for every important moment. He told me that he loved me, that he had always loved me, that nothing would ever change that. And then Santa was there, looking just as he had in life, eternal and magical and full of compassion. He smiled at me, and I smiled back, feeling such gratitude, such love, such connection to this being who had given me the greatest gift I had ever received. He asked me if I had made my decision, if I knew what I wanted to do. And I realized that I did know. I knew with absolute certainty what I wanted, what I was meant to do. I told him that I wanted to join him, to become part of the magic, to help other families the way he had helped mine. I told him that I wanted to give the gift of time, of awareness, of love, to people who needed it, who were facing darkness, who needed light and hope and preparation. He nodded, as if he had known all along what I would choose. He told me that it was not an easy path, that I would see suffering, that I would feel the pain of the families I visited, that I would carry the weight of knowing what was coming for them. But he also told me that it was the most rewarding work imaginable, that I would see love triumph over loss, that I would witness the strength of the human spirit, that I would be part of something beautiful and eternal. My father hugged me one more time, telling me that he understood, that he supported my choice, that he would be here waiting for me when my work was done, however long that took. He told me that he loved me, that he was proud of me, that I was doing what I was meant to do. And then he stepped back, and Santa stepped forward, and I felt a transformation begin. I felt myself changing, becoming something more than I had been, something magical and eternal and full of purpose. I felt connected to every family that had ever celebrated Christmas, to every person who had ever believed in magic, to every heart that had ever been touched by love. I felt the weight of responsibility, but also the joy of service, the privilege of being part of something so much larger than myself. And then I was moving, traveling in ways I could not quite understand, to a house where a family slept, unaware of what was coming, unprepared for the loss they would soon face. I appeared in their living room, and I saw their Christmas tree, their decorations, their stockings hung by the fireplace. And I felt such compassion for them, such love, such desire to help them, to prepare them, to give them the gift I had been given. I reached into my coat, and there was an envelope, cream-colored and important-looking, with their names written in elegant script. I placed it on the mantel, making sure it would be seen, making sure it would be found. And as I did, I thought about my own family, about the letter that had changed everything, about the legacy I was now carrying forward. I heard a sound and turned to see a young boy standing at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes wide with wonder, his small body frozen in awe. He looked so much like I had looked all those years ago, and I felt a connection to him, a kinship, an understanding of what he was experiencing. I walked toward him and knelt down so we were at eye level, just as Santa had done with me. I placed my hand on his shoulder and felt the warmth of him, the life of him, the potential of him. I told him that he was a good boy, that I was proud of him, that he should always take care of his family. I told him that Christmas was about more than presents, that it was about love and kindness and being together. I told him that the magic of Christmas lived in his heart, and that as long as he believed, it would never fade. I told him about the letter, about how important it was, about how it would help his family. And I saw in his eyes the same understanding I had felt, the same sense that something profound was happening, something that would change everything. I stood up, feeling the weight of what I had just done, the responsibility I had taken on, the gift I had given. And then I left, stepping into the flames of their fireplace, moving on to the next family, and the next, and the next. Each one different, each one special, each one deserving of the gift of time, of awareness, of love. And with each letter I delivered, I felt my Father's presence, felt His approval, felt His love supporting me in this work I had chosen. The years passed, or perhaps they did not pass at all, time being different in this magical realm I now inhabited. I visited countless families, delivered countless letters, touched countless lives. And each time, I felt the same compassion, the same love, the same desire to help. I saw families face loss with grace and courage, saw them cherish their time together, saw them honor the gift they had been given. And I saw my own family continue on, generation after generation, reading the letter every Christmas, keeping the tradition alive, passing on the love and the lessons and the magic. I saw my children grow old, saw my grandchildren have children of their own, saw my great-grandchildren become parents. I saw the letter grow more fragile with each passing year, but I also saw it memorized, preserved, honored. And I saw the ripples continue outward, saw our story inspire others, saw the message of the letter touch lives far beyond our family. I saw people change their priorities, saw them cherish their loved ones more, saw them live with more intention and gratitude and awareness. And I knew that the gift Santa had given us had multiplied, had grown, had become something even more beautiful and powerful than I had imagined. I continued my work, delivering letters, preparing families, giving the gift of time and awareness and love. And with each letter, I thought about my own family, about the night that had changed everything, about the legacy that continued on. I thought about my father, waiting for me in that place of light and love, proud of the work I was doing, supporting me from afar. And I thought about the magic of Christmas, about how it was real and eternal and transformative. About how it lived in the hearts of people who believed, who loved, who chose to see the wonder in the world. About how it could sustain people through the darkest times, could give them strength and hope and courage. About how it was, in the end, simply love, pure and profound and powerful. And so I continued, year after year, Christmas after Christmas, family after family. Delivering letters, spreading magic, giving the gift that had been given to me. Honoring my father's memory, honoring Santa's legacy, honoring the love that had shaped my life and that now shaped the lives of countless others. Because that was what the letter had always been about. Not death, but life. Not loss, but love. Not endings, but beginnings. It was about understanding that every moment was precious, that every person was a gift, that every day was an opportunity to show love, to create joy, to make memories. It was about learning to live with intention, with gratitude, with awareness of how fleeting and beautiful life truly was. And it was about magic, real and tangible and transformative magic. The magic of love that transcended death, that connected generations, that made the impossible possible. The magic of belief that sustained people through hardship, that gave them strength when they felt weak, that reminded them of what mattered. The magic of Christmas that lived in hearts and homes and families, that brought light to darkness, that turned sorrow into joy, that made miracles real. This was the gift I had been given, the gift I now gave to others, the gift that would continue on forever, passed from heart to heart, from family to family, from generation to generation. This was the legacy of that snowy Christmas Eve when I was 8 years old, when I saw Santa, when everything changed. This was the power of a single letter, a single act of kindness, a single moment of magic. And as I moved through the world, delivering letters, touching lives, spreading love, I felt complete. I felt purposeful. I felt connected to something eternal and beautiful and profoundly meaningful. I felt my father's pride, Santa's approval, my family's love. And I felt grateful, so incredibly grateful, for the journey I had been on, for the life I had lived, for the work I now did. The magic of Christmas was real. Love was eternal. And the letter that Santa had left for my family all those years ago continued to change lives, to inspire hearts, to remind people of what truly mattered. It was a gift that kept on giving, a miracle that never ended, a story that would be told forever.